The USS Indianapolis completed the most secret mission of World War II with 1,195 men, and then they were forgotten at sea for 4 days. The Indianapolis delivered the core of the atomic bomb that would end the war, and days later she was at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. What followed was the deadliest single disaster in the history of the United States Navy. The Indianapolis was a Portland-class heavy cruiser, 610 feet long, displacing nearly 12,000 tons, armed with 9 8-inch guns, and capable of 32 knots. She wasn't just any ordinary warship. For 8 years, she served as a fleet flagship, and from 1943 onward, she carried the flag of Admiral Raymond Spruance, as he commanded the Fifth Fleet across the Central Pacific. She fought at the Aleutians, the Gilberts, the Marshalls, Saipan, the Philippine Sea, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. 10 battle stars earned her the distinction as one of the most decorated warships of the entire war. But Navy historian Holver said the ship's rich history has been overshadowed by its last 15 minutes. On March 31, 1945, a Japanese kamikaze slammed into the Indianapolis off Okinawa. The plane punched a bomb straight through her hull, and she limped back to California for repairs. While she sat in dry dock at Mare Island, the war's most closely guarded secret came knocking. The Manhattan Project needed a ship. Originally, the USS Pensacola was chosen to carry components of the atomic bomb to Tinian Island in the Pacific. But when the Pensacola went out to test her repaired systems, her engines failed. By a cruel twist of fate, the job fell to the Indianapolis. On July 16, 1945, within hours of the Trinity nuclear test in the New Mexico desert, the Indianapolis departed San Francisco's Hunters Point Naval Shipyard. Bolted and chained to the floor of Captain Charles McVeigh's personal quarters was a lead-lined steel container holding 38.5 kilograms of enriched uranium in disc form. That represented roughly half the entire United States supply. 2 representatives of the Manhattan Project, Dr. James Nolan and Major Robert Furman, traveled aboard incognito. Dr. Nolan was there to monitor the uranium's radioactivity. The crew had absolutely no idea what they were carrying. The mission was, as one historian described it, uber secret. The Indianapolis tore across the Pacific and set a speed record, covering the distance from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor in just 74.5 hours. Averaging 29 knots, she arrived at Pearl Harbor on July 19th, then raced unaccompanied to Tinian, delivering her cargo on July 26th. Mission accomplished. 10 days later, that uranium would be inside the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Ground crews loading the weapon into the plane scrawled graffiti all over it, and one message read, "Greetings to the Emperor from the men of the Indianapolis." But the Indianapolis would never see that day. After delivering her cargo, she sailed to Guam and then departed on July 28th for Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. A routine transit, her secret mission was over, and this is where the failures began to compound. General Leslie Groves, head of the Manhattan Project, would later learn that the Indianapolis had been a very poor choice for the mission. She had no underwater sound equipment, no sonar, and her design was such that a single torpedo could sink her quickly. At 14 minutes past midnight on July 30th, 1945, 2 Type 95 torpedoes, 24-inch weapons carrying 900-kilogram warheads, fired from the Japanese submarine Y-58 and struck the Indianapolis on her starboard side. One hit the bow, one hit amidships. Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, who had participated in the Pearl Harbor attack, commanded the submarine. The Indianapolis sank in 12 minutes. Of her 1,195 crew, roughly 300 went down with the ship. The remaining 890 men were cast into the dark waters of the Philippine Sea with few lifeboats, almost no food, and almost no water, and then nobody came. 3 shore stations actually received the Indianapolis distress signals. One commanding officer was drunk, another had ordered his men not to disturb him, and the third dismissed the signals as a Japanese trap. Because of the way the Navy reporting system worked at the time, and a cascading series of bureaucratic failures, the Indianapolis was simply not missed. No one raised the alarm. For 4 days and 5 nights, nearly 900 men floated in the open ocean, The chief medical officer, Dr. Lewis Haynes, later recalled the horror. "There was nothing I could do but give advice, bury the dead, save the life jackets, and try to keep the men from drinking the salt water. The real young ones, you take away their hope, you take away their water and food. They would drink salt water and then would go fast. They would get diarrhea, then get more dehydrated, then become very maniacal. And then there were the sharks. Oceanic white-tip sharks, drawn by the blood and the thrashing." Survivor Lowell Dean Cox described it this way: "Every now and then, like lightning, one would come straight up and take a sailor and take him straight down. One came up and took the sailor next to me. It was just somebody screaming, yelling, or getting bit." The sharks have become the most famous element of this story, partly because of Robert Shaw's chilling Indianapolis monologue in the 1975 film Jaws. But historians note that while oceanic white-tip sharks certainly killed men in the water, likely between a few dozen and 150, the majority of deaths came from exposure, dehydration, saltwater poisoning, exhaustion, and injuries sustained in the sinking itself. It was not until August 2nd, around 11 in the morning, that Navy Lieutenant Junior Grade Wilbur C. Gwynn, flying a routine patrol in his PV-1 Ventura, spotted a massive oil slick. He initially thought it was trailing a Japanese submarine. Then he saw the men. Once Gwynn reported what he had found, a rescue operation mobilized. And here is where one man's courage changed everything. Lieutenant Robert Adrian Marks, piloting a PBY Catalina flying boat, arrived over the scene and saw men being circled by sharks. Against standing orders never to land in open ocean, Marks took a vote of his crew. They agreed, and he brought the aircraft down in 12-foot swells. When the plane filled up, he had survivors lashed to the wings with parachute cord. 56 men owed their lives to that decision. The landing destroyed the aircraft, and Marks never flew it again. Admiral Nimitz later awarded him the Air Medal for his extraordinary heroism. By the time 7 rescue ships arrived, including the USS Cecil J. Doyle, only 316 men were still alive. 579 had perished in the water. The aftermath brought its own injustice. Captain Charles McVeigh survived the sinking and was court-martialed in November 1945, the only captain in U.S. Navy history to face such proceedings for losing a ship to an act of war. He was convicted of hazarding his vessel by failing to zigzag. Commander Hashimoto himself was brought to testify, and he told the court that zigzagging would have made no difference whatsoever. It did not matter, and McVeigh was found guilty. For decades afterward, families of the dead sent him hate mail and Christmas cards that read, "Merry Christmas. Our family's holiday would be a lot merrier if you had not killed my son." On November 6, 1968, Charles McVeigh was found dead at his home. He had taken his own life at age 70, according to some accounts clutching a toy sailor that had been given to him as a boy. The story might have ended there, but in 1996, an 11-year-old boy named Hunter Scott watched Jaws with his father and became fascinated by the Indianapolis monologue. He interviewed nearly 150 survivors and reviewed 800 documents for a 6th-grade history project. His research helped trigger a congressional investigation, and on October 30, 2000, Congress and President Clinton officially exonerated Captain McVeigh. Hunter Scott grew up to become a naval aviator, and today he serves as an executive officer at MCAS Miramar. On August 19, 2017, a search team funded by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen located the wreck of the Indianapolis in the Philippine Sea, resting 18,000 feet below the surface. Allen called it truly humbling. Of the 316 survivors, only one remains. Harold Bray is 98 years old. In 2023, he wrote a letter to the last surviving crew member of the I-58, 94-year-old Kunshiro Kiyozumi. He wrote, "I want to extend my hand in friendship to you. There are no winners in a war. Both sides lose so much." In 2018, the crew of the Indianapolis was collectively awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. 80 years later, their story endures, not just as a tale of tragedy, but as a reminder of what happens when courage, secrecy, and human failure collide in the vastness of the sea.